I'm going to try to give you some direction in tools. There's going to be some videos posted as well that you can go in and take a look at. There is some information that I disagree with that's in some of these videos, so I'm going to give you my best choice of videos for you to watch to get an idea about tools. We're going to talk about a tool project as well. Well, let me start with that. The tool project is an assignment that you have here that is going to require you to look up tools and their prices. And now I've provided you with a recommended list of tools for the starter mechanic, the things you should have, and it includes, you know, ratchets and sockets and screwdrivers and hammers and all the things that you would need just to get a start in the automotive field. Also, in that, you're going to get a imaginary $1,000 to purchase these tools. So what you must do is go through, and you can use you know, if you wanted to use Harbor Freight, or if you wanted to use Snap-on, or if you wanted to use whatever company you want to use to buy tools, and you don't have to buy them all from one company, you can buy them from whatever company you want. Also, if you just want to go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or someplace like that and look up your tools, you can go there and look up your tools. And the idea is that for that $1,000, you're going to buy a storage device, a toolbox to put your tools in, and you're also going to buy all the tools you need to start as an automotive technician. So that is what this assignment's about. The due dates are on the syllabus, so just look at the syllabus to give you an idea when you need to have this project done. But all the directions should be there. And of course, if you have any questions, send me an email, and I will respond as quickly as possible to your email so that we can take care of that. So starting off with some of the things that the videos that you're going to watch are going to cover are going to talk about ratchets. And they give you the drive size. And I just wanted to cover this real quick because it doesn't show it clearly on most of them. But if you look at this, this is a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. So it's small. A 1/4-inch drive ratchet is used in automotive. You use it especially in interior components and things like that. But if you notice, you know, I've got a relatively short handle. So I have very little leverage on this ratchet. So I'm using this on tiny bolts, and I don't want a whole lot of leverage on it. So this is going to go, generally the socket set you want to go from 5.5 millimeter, because there's fasteners of 5.5 millimeter, up to about 12, 13 millimeter, somewhere in that range. If you put a 13 millimeter socket on this and try to break it loose, you don't have a whole lot of leverage to break that loose. So you may have difficulty doing that. So you want to really be in the center of that range when you're using this ratchet, because you can buy 13 millimeter sockets that go to a 3/8 drive, and you're going to have more leverage. So just in comparison, here's a 3/8 drive, and you can see the difference between the drive, and this is what they're talking about when they talk about drive. So this is a 1/4-inch drive, this is 3/8 drive. 3/8 drive is going to be the most common ratchet that you're going to grab when you are working on a car. So the 3/8 drive, generally you're talking between a roughly 10 millimeter and 21 millimeter socket, and what we're talking about there is the distance across those flats for the 10 to 10 millimeter. So a 10 millimeter socket would be across these flats right here. And then you have the 1/2-inch drive. So we see that the lug or the drive section on here is bigger than the 3/8 drive, and this is a 1/2-inch drive ratchet. And again, you have more leverage with a 1/2-inch drive, so you're going to go to larger sockets with this. And you know, this one you're going to go maybe from maybe 18 millimeter up to 32 millimeter maybe. Once you get to a certain size, you know, once you get let's say, for example, I was breaking an axle nut loose with this, a 32 millimeter or 36 millimeter axle nut. Well, that's not going to really do the trick. I would have to put a pipe on this or something, which is not recommended. This has little teeth inside it. Those little teeth will shear off and you'll damage this ratchet. So we don't really want to do that. You don't want to put a pipe on that. what you want to get is this thing here. This is a breaker bar, all right? So breaker bar, this one's 24-inch, 2-foot long breaker bar. This fits on a 1/2-inch drive. It has a 1/2-inch drive lug on it, so you'd put that on your 32 or 36 millimeter socket and break that loose. And you could put a piece of pipe on the end of this to get additional leverage. So that's a breaker bar. So that's ratchets and breaker bars. We have a variety of sockets. You're going to have sockets that are for special purposes, but this would be a standard depth socket. Okay, sometimes they're called shallow, sometimes they're called standard depth. But if we looked at this socket, and I don't have my glasses on, so I don't have my glasses with me. So I think this is a fractional socket. This is 3/4, all right? So you have SAE and you have metric. Most of what you're going to need is going to be metric. All cars manufactured today use metric bolts. So metric is probably what you're going to want, but there are some vehicles, if you're still working on old domestic cars, you're going to run into SAE bolts as well. So you want to make sure that you have at least the ones that you need. Sometimes you'll hear that this is okay, sometimes you won't, but there are a lot of sockets that are interchangeable. 14 millimeter 9/16 are the same size. The difference is so small that it's probably not going to make a difference at all. Unless that bolt is extremely tight, you should be able to use a 14 millimeter and a 9/16 on the same bolt or nut. For 1/2-inch, it's 13. For 7/16, it's 11 millimeter. And you don't need to know this. I'm just going through. There's a bunch of them that will match, and you can use them interchangeably. And then there's a bunch that won't. You know, there is no metric equivalent to 5/8. There's no metric equivalent to 3/8. There's no SAE equivalent to 10 millimeter. So when we go through and look at sockets, it's best just to buy 2 complete sets. One SAE, if you're going to work on vehicles with SAE bolts, an SAE set and a metric set. So again, this is a metric, or this is a SAE standard depth socket in 3/8 drive. So this particular socket fits this particular ratchet because that is the same size. So that's a 3/8 drive, standard depth. If you look at this, it has 6 points in it. So it's a 6-point socket versus a 12-point socket. So you got 6-point and 12-point. So this would be, in this case, a 3/4, 6-point, 3/8 drive socket. Now, when we get to the practical portion that we should be doing for our either final or midterm exam, depending on how we work that, you need to be able to identify it like that. You need to be able to say, this is a 6-point, 3/4 drive, or 3/8 drive, 3/4 inch standard depth socket, okay? So just keep that in your mind. So then we have this one. This is a deep well, 12-point, and again, I can't read the, we'll say, oh, it's an 18 millimeter. So this is an 18 millimeter deep well, 12-point, 1/2-inch drive socket. So this is a bigger socket, and that's going to go on my 1/2-inch drive ratchet. Okay, so that fits on a 1/2-inch drive. And when you put this on, it's not going on away. Press the button, that locks that socket in. Press the button, take that socket off. So some have this on, some of them don't. Half the time they don't work anyway, but that's the socket release on the ratchet. And speaking of ratchets, I just wanted to show you, this is a flex head ratchet. This is 3/8 drive with a longer handle on it, and it's also a flex head. So if I need to get in at an angle somewhere, I can use this particular ratchet to get it into an angle. We also use extensions. If I'm trying to reach somewhere, let's say, for example, I have a bolt that's down behind something and I can't reach it with, put the ratchet on, or I have no room to rotate the ratchet once I do, I can use an extension. I have long extensions and short extensions. You'll get them in 3-inch. You get them all the way to 24-inch extensions. When I worked in the shop pulling transmission, if I'm pulling a transmission out of a GM, you hang the back of the thing down and you got 2 24-inch extensions, so you can stand 4 feet behind the transmission and take those bolts out. But Extensions are handy and necessary, and they come in each size, so 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch. You can get them with a wobble end, which allows the socket to have just a little bit of an offset, so if you have a slight angle you need to get into, you have a means to do that with a wobble socket. Electric or pneumatic ratchets. You can get Milwaukee makes a good small electric ratchet, so it has a battery powered, and I don't have an example to show you right now, but it's just an electric ratchet and it rotates by electricity. So you can stick it in, you can turn it to either right-hand rotation or left-hand rotation, so you can take bolts off or put them on. And you have pneumatic. I don't have an example of that either, but in your pneumatic ratchet, it just runs off of compressed air from your shop air. So you can use those to drive that socket on and off. If you're taking off something that's extremely tight, you may want to go with an impact. And we have here, this is a pneumatic impact. This is a 1/2 inch drive pneumatic impact wrench. This was the standard for automotive for a long time. Most people have shifted over to a battery powered impact because they work just as well. So I don't have it here. Again, I use a DeWalt 1/2 inch, and I'm not saying any brand is better than the other brand. I just know for the price, DeWalt's a pretty good price, and it's still a very strong 1/2 inch impact, and there's nothing I've gotten to that I could have taken off with a pneumatic impact that I haven't been able to take off with the electric impact. And this comes in, this is a 1/2 inch drive, so the bigger the drive, the more power generally you're going to have output from the tool. And with these, when you're using an impact, you're using an impact socket. So an impact socket does not have chrome on it. They're going to be 6-point for the most part. You know, you have some fasteners that are 12-point fasteners. I can't say that I've seen a 12-point impact, but I'm not saying that there's not one. But most impacts are going to be 6-point. They're made out of a softer metal, so that the action that comes from this drive is a hammering action. The original impact wrench was a wrench you would put on like a big wrench, and then you'd hit it with a hammer. So this does a similar thing. This has a small hammering action inside here that rotates and turns this. And you use impact sockets with this. This happens to be a deep well 1/2 inch drive, 24 millimeter impact socket. You have battery powered impact. This is a 3/8 drive battery powered impact, so the anvil is 3/8 drive. And then they make these where they don't have quite as much power. They're more like a drill that you could use for taking off in interior parts. But this is a 3/8 drive impact. This is an extremely handy tool, and you'll find out as you put tools in your toolbox, the ones you grab all the time, those are the ones that are the most handy. So in sockets, this is a swivel, so if you have something that's at an angle, you can use a swivel for it. These are okay. When you use these, a lot of times you get them at an angle and they'll bind up and try to pull the socket off of the component you're working with, so they're not great. These are fantastic. These have a ball fitting inside, so it's a ball and socket fitting, and you can put them at the angle, and the force is always transmitted directly onto the fastener as you would expect. It's not going to pull the fastener or pull the socket off the fastener or anything like that. So that's just the basics of sockets. And again, you're going to, as you research this, or if you have questions about specific tools, you know, make sure that you ask about those specific tools. But for sockets, we have both impact and chrome sockets. You have 6-point and 12-point. You have shallow or standard, intermediate, and deep well sockets. There's also specialty sockets for spark plugs. If you buy a socket set, a lot of times they'll come with a spark plug socket in them. For wrenches, we've got several different types of wrenches as well. I'll start off with the simple combination wrench. One of the videos that I was going to play, they just kept describing everything wrong, so I figured I'd do this so that we cover a combination wrench. Combination wrench is a combination of an open end and a box end wrench. So I have the open end on this side, a box end on this side. Normally, on most combination wrench, this is going to be an offset angle from the handle. So we're at about 12 degrees offset here. We're also at about 12 degrees offset here. So if you see this box part is flat, that allows you to put your hand underneath. Your knuckles have room to move against whatever that fastener is attached to. So that is a combination wrench. And again, if you're describing this in a practical, you're going to say this is a 16 millimeter combination wrench, 12 point. So if you look at this end, again, I have 12 points inside here, because these wrenches, combination wrench, come in both 12 point and 6 point. So you might have 6 point or 12 point. And the difference, the reason for that is if I'm in a tight spot, I may have just, only a little bit of angle I can get on. So the 12 point is going to be great for that. The problem with the 12 point is it grabs on the corners of the fasteners. So the 12 point grabs the corners of the fasteners. So when you turn it, it has the possibility of rounding off those fasteners, whereas a 6 point grabs on the flats of the fastener. It's not a good example because it's not the right size wrench, but you can see on the fastener, I have 6 sides on the fastener. If I put a 12 point on, it's only grabbing on these corners. If I put a 6 point on, it's going to grab on the flats of it. So it's better for breaking a bolt loose to use a 6 point. That's going to be with sockets and with wrenches. We also have what's called a line wrench. This wrench is specifically designed to take off like hydraulic lines for brakes or AC lines. A lot of times AC lines will be soft aluminum fittings, and if you were to use a regular open end wrench on them, if I take this open end section of the combination wrench and tried to turn it, it would round off the corners of that. So again, because this has 6 points, those flats grab a hold of the flats. You're less likely to round off the bolt. That doesn't mean you're not gonna round off the bolt, but you're less likely to do it this way. And always be cautious. If you feel the material of the bolt yielding, you stop, see if you can figure out a better way, maybe use some heat on it, something like that to take it off. But this is known as a flare nut wrench or a line wrench, flare nut or line wrench, because it has this opening to get around the line, and then it has the flats in order to grab a hold of the connector on that line without damaging it. So we got combination wrench and a flare nut or line wrench. Now, you can get wrenches that are open end on both ends. You'll see wrenches that have open ends on both ends. You'll see wrenches that have box end on both. So they would be, if it has opens on both ends, it's going to be an open end wrench. And if it has a box on both ends, it'll be a box end wrench. And you can buy wrenches for all kinds of purposes. I had a specific wrench that was a box end long wrench with I forget what metric size it was, but there was no offset here. So it wasn't, you can see how this is offset, so that if you had this on the fastener, the handles up, had no offset, and I used those specifically for Honda Accord timing belt. So you may end up buying a specific type of bolt or type of wrench to take off a particular bolt on of something that you are working on in the shop. Next, we'll talk about screwdrivers. Each tool kit should have a set of screwdrivers in it. You got 2 types of screwdrivers. You probably already know. We've got a flathead or straight bladed screwdriver. And they come in, you can have long, short, there's a stubby, straight bladed screwdriver. Same thing with any other screwdriver. You can get them in long or short. And you're going to need a variety in order to be able to work with vehicle. Need multiple different styles. You have to excuse the jets flying over there. Langley, you got the F-22s landing. So, also we have Phillips screwdriver. So here's 3 Phillips screwdrivers, and With Phillips screwdrivers, there's three sizes mainly that you're going to have for automotive. You got a number one, a number two, and a number three. And obviously, you know, number one's the smallest. Number two is a little bit larger. Number three is larger yet. You'll find that there are caliper, or not caliper, but rotor screws that will use a number three. You'll find electronic computer covers, things like that, that use number one, but most will be a number two. So number two is the most common Phillips screwdriver used in automotive, but you'll use all three. We also have Torx screwdrivers, and I'm not sure how this will show up on the screen. Probably not very good. Anyway, it's a multi-point star driver, whatever you want to call it, and they come in screwdriver tips. You can get them in bits, so we can get a bit that looks like that. But it's up to you whether you want a set of screwdriver Torx screwdrivers or get a set of bits that can go with an extension, and you can put them on a driver of some sort in order to use them. But we'll talk about, I'll try to just show Torx set kit, because there's internal Torx and there's external Torx. This is an E-bit, and this is an external Torx. So if you were to take that Torx socket, you'd see it fits right into, like this one here, you can see the drive, and that's what the head of the fastener would look like. It would look like this, but this goes on the opposite. These are used on, especially foreign cars, on head bolts, and a lot of other stuff as well. But those are Torx, both internal and external Torx. Next, we're going to talk about pliers, and we'll start off with a simple linesman's pliers. This is a fixed set of pliers. They'll have a cutting section here in the center of it, and some teeth there. But that's a set of linesman pliers, and they come in multiple different sizes from small to large. We have a set of diagonal cutters, or dikes cutters, but primarily the name for them is diagonal cutters, and the term that we use most of the time in automotive is a pair of dikes. So this is a pair of dikes. We have slip joint pliers, and you see these, I have two positions for this on a slip joint plier. So that's a slip joint plier, and that's the name of that. So if you have that on a test, like if we have when we have our practical test where you're identifying tools on a bench in the shop, that's what you would call this. This would be a slip joint plier, okay? Slip joint pliers. We have locking pliers, right? And the common name that is used a lot of times for this type of locking plier is Vice Grip. Vice Grip is actually the brand that makes this type of locking pliers, and they're interchangeable, so it's an acceptable term. When we talk about what terms are used for tools, we try to go by what is commonly accepted as the term for that tool in automotive. So for this particular tool, Vice Grips is acceptable, locking pliers is acceptable. You know, if you call this an Apple, that's not going to be accessible or acceptable. It is Vice Grips or locking pliers. These are channel locks. Well, these are rib joint pliers. Channel locks is also a brand name, but it's also a commonly accepted term for these type of pliers. So you can move it in different positions to grab whatever you're trying to get a hold of. But it is a rib joint plier. You can see how it has these ribs right here in order to change the width of the jaw. So rib joint or channel lock, sometimes they're referred to as water pump pliers. Don't know why, but sometimes that's the name used for those. This is a often referred to as a adjustable wrench or a monkey wrench, but it is also a pipe wrench. So it has a set of teeth on here. They taper inward. The only thing I've used these on for automotive is to adjust toe in doing front end alignment. So there's probably other uses in automotive. They make specific tools for adjusting toe, so really you should use that tool, but I have used these to make toe adjustments, turning the tie rods using a pipe wrench or a monkey wrench. We also have snap ring pliers, and I don't know if you can see these, but it has 2 pins on the end of it, and when you squeeze this in this fashion, it's pulling a snap ring together, and when you open it up, you'd be opening up. But this is actually, you can change this from a pair of pliers that opens the snap ring to a pair of pliers that closes the snap ring. And I was trying to look around to see if I have a snap ring on something here in the shop that I can show you. Give me a second and I will take a quick look around and see if I got something. Sorry, I looked around and I can't find anything with a snap ring on it that's easily accessible that I could show you. So hopefully I'll find something and I'll put it on video at some point and you'll have that. But just going over the other tools that we have, just kind of basic tools for automotive repair. Hammers are necessary. This is a dead blow hammer. It has sand inside it. When you hit something, it doesn't bounce back. It's got a soft face so you don't damage components. So if I was trying to drive something apart that I didn't want to damage, I could use that dead blow hammer. There's also rubber mallet, which I didn't bring out here, but a rubber mallet just has a big piece of rubber. Now that'll bounce, but again, you're using that to try not to mar whatever the component is or damage it. So if you have wheel covers that you're trying to reinstall, a rubber mallet for those. This is the primary hammer that you're going to use in automotive. This is a ball peen hammer. Generally, you don't have a claw hammer in your toolbox. You can, but the claw hammer is used to pull nails out, so we don't use that end of the ball peen hammer very much. In your safety instructions, it says never hit 2 hammers together, so don't do that. For the ball peen hammer, depending on what you're going to take apart is going to make a difference in how big of a hammer you use. You know, if I'm working on cars, this hammer right here is probably pretty good for most things I'm going to do on cars. And you use hammers more on suspension work than probably anything else. When you're separating ball joints or you know, driving out a component or driving something in, you may use a ball peen hammer. The bigger the vehicle, the bigger the hammer. So if I'm, you know, trying to separate a tie rod end on a tractor trailer, I'm going to use a bigger hammer than that ball peen. And you can use this. This is called an engineer's hammer or mini sledgehammer. And that'll do the trick a lot of times. And again, as you get in bigger and bigger equipment, if you're working on heavy equipment, you're going to need a sledgehammer. You're going to need something with a long handle and a heavy end to separate components. So the bigger the vehicle that you're using, the bigger the hammer you're going to need to separate the components out. You also need oil filter wrenches. So if you're starting off, you're going to do a lot of oil changes, a lot of tire work. I prefer this style of oil filter wrench. It allows you to grab, you can see how this thing will close off. It's got a slip joint in it. It's got teeth here, and it allows you to grab hold of that oil filter pretty easy. And in this case, it can go from small to a fairly large oil filter. So these are pretty good. They give you a good leverage for oil filters. There's some that won't work on. You can't get to them like that. So you've got a variety of types. You can either get cups that hook to a ratchet and you can ratchet them off with these cups. There are Toyotas that I have a special cup just for that particular Toyota. I think it's for a Highlander because they have a very specific filter in a place that you can't get anything else on it. So we use that particular wrench for that. So, you know, there's a variety of types of tools that are used to take off oil filters. These universal tools are good to have in your toolbox because they're going to get most of those oil filters. Some other tools that you want to have in your box. A multimeter, this is a cheap Craftsman multimeter. It's about 20 bucks for these particular types of multimeters. They are good for just about everything you need to do with a multimeter. When you get beyond this, if you need a graphing multimeter or something like that, you're better to go with some form of cheap scope. And I don't want to get into, this is something that you'll do with electrical and electronics. There's a company called U-Scope that makes a scope that you can buy that does everything that you would want to do with a graphing multimeter. So my recommendation is to not go too expensive. Don't go too cheap. You know, don't get the $6 Amazon multimeter, because chances are it's not going to give you correct readings. So you got to be careful there. But this one works pretty good. I've used this almost all my automotive career. I've used Craftsman simple multimeters, and they have done everything I need to do. You know, we'll learn, if you're not already doing this in electrical, that you're going to do voltage drop tests, and voltage drop tests are going to give you a lot of the information that you'll need when it comes to electrical diagnostics. So this does perfect work on voltage drop measurements. I've never had a problem with it. I've used this, so you know, not that I'm not endorsing any particular tool, but these work great. Also a test light. I use a test light for a lot of things. When you use a test light, this is an incandescent test light. I like the incandescent test light. I like it better than I like an LED test light. It's a very handy tool to have in your toolbox. You got to be careful. You don't want to check until you know what you're doing. You don't want to check computer circuits with this. But you just connect this to ground or negative battery cable, and then you can check for power using this end, or I can connect this to power, and I can check for ground using this terminal. But a incandescent test light is good. This is dirt cheap. They're like I think $7 at Harbor Freight, and that's fine for what you're buying here. That's all you need. Also, a set of pick tools, and I don't know if you can see these or not. These pick tools are handy for all kinds of stuff. Taking apart electrical connectors, trying to get a hold of the end of a snap ring. You know, just there's lots of things where a pick tool becomes a handy tool to have in your toolbox. So I would recommend that you have a pick tool in your toolbox. There's several other tools that are on the tool list that's in Canvas that you can take a look at. And I would recommend you take a good look at that list and get the most you can for the tool project. Most of the tools, you should be able to get almost all those tools for your $1,000 and put them in, but you'll see the prices of different tools. And there's going to be a huge difference between what you pay for a Snap-on tool versus what you pay for a Harbor Freight tool. Some of the things that we didn't mention that you'll see as you look through there is a torque wrench. You definitely need a torque wrench for even something as simple as reinstalling a wheel on a car. You want to torque those lug nuts to spec. There is a specification from the manufacturer for every bolt on a car, and you want to make sure you tighten them to that correct spec. So a torque wrench is essential, and a bunch of other, you know, simple tools, inspection mirrors, magnets to pick stuff up with. You want to have all that in your toolbox if you can. Remember, when you're doing the tool project, you also need to add tax if you're buying it through a store. You may need to add shipping to it. You want to make sure that you have a pencil so you can write stuff down when you're working on a vehicle. You need safety glasses, so on and so forth. So just make sure you got everything that you should have to start as a technician when you submit your tool project. And I will see you all next week. I'm out of town this week. This is the best I could do for the short notice I have. There's a lot of other tools that we could go through. I talked about torque, you know, with Torx bits. There's tamper-proof Torx bits. There's I have a whole cabinet of specialty tools. And if I get the opportunity next week when we meet, I will go through some of that stuff in the shop with you, because we're going to do an in-shop class next week, and I will see how it goes. I don't even know how we're, you know, exactly how we're doing that yet, but we'll go in and we'll figure it out. So until next week, I'll see you later.